Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. I hope you're doing well, you, your family, your team, everyone around you, as we roll through September as I'm recording this. What's today? The 17th of September. Whenever you may be listening to this or watching this, I hope you're doing well. I hope, you're being as kind to yourself and others as possible. And that's what I want to talk about today, kindness. Now, I've spoken about kindness before here on the show, although not that much. And it's been something that I've thought about and written about and spoken about a bit over the years, but I've been thinking about it in a couple different contexts recently. It just seems like, I don't know, maybe it's the state of the country or the world right now. Maybe it's the current presidential election that's happening here in the US as I'm recording this again, depending on when you're watching or listening to this. It just feels like there's a lot of meanness and negativity. And I don't mean to be adding to the negativity by complaining about that necessarily. But I woke up this morning and was thinking a bit about how can I be more kind to the people around me? How can I be more kind to myself? How can I just infuse what I do with even a deeper and more authentic level of kindness? Um, and again, on the one hand, it's a pretty simple concept. I think most of us want to be kind, appreciate kindness, aspire to be kind. And I don't think too many of us wake up in the morning and say, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to be mean to everybody. But it's a tricky thing, like a lot of things that I write about, speak about, research about, whether we're talking about appreciation or authenticity or compassion or perspective or balance or navigating change. I mean, there's things that we aspire to be, and then there's the reality of life and work and just, living and leading and parenting and operating in the world. And so let's talk a little bit about why kindness can be challenging or what makes it difficult for us to be kind to others and even and especially to ourselves. I think one of the first things is that it's seen often as soft or weak, right? We don't think of strength as being about kindness. But in reality, if you think of the most effective leaders that you've worked with, you think of the best coaches or mentors or therapists you've ever had, you think of the best teachers, um, parents, people who really inspire us, whether it's currently in our lives or in the past, they usually operate with some level of kindness. Maybe again, they might have pushed us and challenged us, and they might, have a level of intensity or accountability, but there's a level of kindness that exists. But for a lot of us, I think, and I know this is true for myself, there's this notion that being kind is weak or soft. And I think another reason that we sometimes struggle with kindness is that we confuse it with niceness. And look, there's nothing inherently wrong with being nice. I think of myself as a nice person. I want to be a nice person, but what often sort of is infused in niceness is like we won't speak up or we won't offend people or we don't want to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. So it can be um, sort of, there's an element of being a pushover that can be associated with being nice. Sometimes we do or say things that are nice, but they're not true. So it's actually unkind at times to be inauthentically nice with people. But because, again, and this can depend on our background, it can depend on our race, our age, our gender, how we're raised, where we grew up. I mean, there's lots of different messages that we get, being a good boy or a good girl, or, be nice and be nice to your sister, be nice to and again, if our parents or our teachers or our coaches taught us that as kids, that was a good message, right? I mean, it's definitely better to be nice than to be mean. But again, there's a distinction between niceness and kindness. And I think of kindness as more of an authentic choice. There's more strength, there's more power in it. And again, not that niceness is a bad thing, but I feel like kindness is different and has more depth, has more power in it. But because we get confused with that, or again, we do end up getting taken advantage of, or people think of us as a pushover because we're nice people. Sometimes there's a tendency to kind of move away from authentic kindness out of fear of the disempowering nature of niceness. Look, another reason that kindness can be challenging is there's a lot of negativity in the world these days. There's a lot of meanness. There's a lot of intense things going on. Again, just think about the political conversation happening right now. Ooh, it's tricky. It's gnarly. There's a lot at stake. And again, whenever you're listening to this or watching this, I happen to be recording this in September of 2024 as we're leading up to, what are we, 7 weeks away from a presidential election here in the US. But like it seems to be that that's been the case for many, many months and years now. And so being kind again can be seen as weak or soft, or it can be sort of seen as a pushover. But it's like, how do I respond to the negativity or the meanness of the world or the people around me? Like sometimes in life and in business, we got to, throw a few elbows, as they might say, using kind of a basketball metaphor. It's like, hey, there's all the cliches, nice guys finish last or whatever it is. Now, again, I don't necessarily agree with those things, but we've been taught those things or indoctrinated with those things. Or again, we try to operate with kindness at work, and then we see someone who's being selfish or being manipulative or even being mean, and they somehow get over on us, or they get opportunities that we don't get. Or again, maybe we struggle with boundaries. And so it's like, how can I be kind and set boundaries? How can I be kind and give feedback? How can I be kind and hold people accountable? Like it can seem sort of paradoxical or almost like a catch 22. I'm so kind, people don't take me seriously. Now, again, I think we're confusing it with niceness, or there's some inauthenticity in the kindness, but like that can show up. Another thing related to this is it's not always rewarded or encouraged or modeled. So we don't see it. It's not, hey, we're going to give you a raise or a bonus or a promotion because you were so kind to everyone. It's like, no, hey, we live in a bottom line world. Did you produce the result? Now, hopefully you weren't a jerk in the process, but it's like not really one of those things that we tend to get rewarded for, or get acknowledged for, or get recognized for. Now, it's fundamentally important to our success, to our ability to connect with other humans, to our ability to lead and inspire people and coach people and all the things that we want to do in life. But again, it's often more of an indirect thing as opposed to something specific that people will call out or acknowledge. What had him or her be so successful? Oh, they're so kind. And another primary thing that really gets in our way of being kind in general and especially to others is we're not often kind to ourselves, right? I love the Brene Brown quote. She says, talk to yourself as if you're talking to someone who you really love. And while that's a beautiful quote and a beautiful sentiment and something that I aspire to and I've been writing about and speaking about for years, we're often pretty mean to ourselves. We're harsh towards ourselves. We're critical of ourselves. And as you've probably heard me say here on the show before, I don't think we actually see other people as they are. We see them as we are, meaning when I'm being mean to myself, when I'm not being kind to myself, it's going to be very difficult for me to be kind to you in any authentic way. Not that I can't do it, it's just going to be challenging. Because if I'm over here beating myself up or being really harsh towards myself or critical of myself, that's the lens at which I'm looking at you and the world. And while I may not mean to be mean or critical of you, or mean to be mean or critical of the world, or mean to be looking for what's wrong or where are the problems or where are the issues or where are the flaws or whatever, if I'm doing that towards myself and to myself, that's going to orient me how I'm looking at the world, how I'm seeing other people. So bringing kindness to the world starts with bringing kindness to ourselves. And often, for a bunch of understandable reasons, we're not encouraged to do that. It's hard to do. Our brains and nervous systems are wired for negativity, for protection and survival, like all the things. But if I'm being negative and critical towards myself and to myself, I'm going to bring that negativity and that criticism to how I see others and see the world. So it's going to be more challenging for me to be kind. Not impossible, just more challenging. So those are some of the reasons why being kind, as important as it is, as positive as it is, as much as most of us, all of us, right? If you're watching this or listening to this, you're the kind of person that I would imagine kindness is important to you. It's a value, it's a virtue, it's something we all aspire to, but these things can get in the way. So, what can we do to be more kind? And why is that even important? Well, again, it's important if we want to have healthy, harmonious relationships. It's important if we want to have connection and trust with other human beings. It's important if we're going to see people and be able to support them, potentially coach them, empower them, hold them accountable, give them feedback that actually makes a difference and that they can hear. And, have not only the kind of relationships and teams we want to have, but do the kind of work and be the kind of people we want to be in the world. That said, and understanding that it can be challenging, here are some things that we can do to really expand our capacity for kindness. The first thing for us to do is to start with being kind to ourselves, start with some self compassion, right? As I was just saying, we don't see others as they are, we see them as we are. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we see ourselves. So the more you can be kind to yourselves, the more empathy and understanding you can have for yourselves, the more you can kind of let yourself off the hook a bit, cut yourself some slack. Again, not being lazy, not having a healthy high standard for ourselves, not at all, but really have that sense of self-compassion. Self-compassion is about mindfulness, like awareness. Notice when I'm being mean to myself or critical of myself. It's about bringing kindness towards myself, to myself, in the way that we would with a baby, with a child, with a animal, with someone who we know how to be kind. It's innate in all of us. And it's also about identifying or at least understanding the common humanity of being self critical. So we don't want to then be critical of ourselves for being self critical. That can be kind of a little double edged sword of awareness once we start to notice, oh, wow, I'm being really critical of myself. And then we start being critical of ourselves for being critical of ourselves. So can we bring compassion even to the critical part of ourselves, even to that voice in our head that's constantly critiquing everything we do and say and how we look and how we show up and all the things, right? So practicing self-compassion, a very practical way to practice self-compassion. And if you're not driving at the moment or doing something where you can take a moment to do this, I invite you to do this right here in the moment. If you're driving or you're in the midst of something where you can't do this, you can do it later. But if you just stop and put both of your hands on your heart like this, for those of you watching the video, you can see me doing it. If you're just listening to this, just put both your hands on your heart and take a deep breath. This hand on heart technique, as simple as it is, can change your brain, your nervous system. It can lower the cortisol level, increase the serotonin and oxytocin, can actually bring you into the present moment. And sometimes if I'm sitting here in my office or I'm, you know, in a hotel or on an airplane or about to step on stage or go into a meeting or sit down to talk to one of my daughters, or if I can remember to do this, just to sometimes close my eyes, take a breath, and even say something kind to myself. Like, you got this, Mike, or it's all going to work out. Or even say, I love you, and use your own name. Notice what that feels like if you say, I love you, or I forgive you, or I appreciate you. In my case, I would say Mike, right? But you say your name. Those are practical ways to have some self compassion. Another thing you can do to increase your self compassion, and I've shared this on the show many times, is write down things that you forgive yourself for. I try to do this every day. I have a journal over here sitting on my desk where I try to write down 3 things I'm grateful for and 3 things I forgive myself for every day. Because that tendency in me to be critical of myself is really strong. So by writing down things that I forgive myself for allows me to practice in a very practical way being more compassionate. And that self compassion then allows us to be kind to ourselves. And if we're kind to ourselves, we're more likely to be kind with others. That's huge. And it's the foundation. Another thing that we can do, second thing we can do, is practice patience. Anyone who knows me knows this is a challenge for me. I get revved high. I move fast. I'm here, there, and everywhere. I want to, let's go, let's go, let's go. Come on. With myself, with other people, even the people I love the most. Michelle, Samantha, and Rosie, like my family, they all tell you, like, dad isn't always so patient. And I say this again, not to let myself off the hook about it, trying to have some compassion for myself, but practice being patient with ourselves, with other people, understanding that the world moves fast. We're now expecting things to happen instantaneously. I mean, especially with our phones and with Google and Chat GPT, and we want to know right now, let's go. Just waiting sometimes. It's not baked into our daily experience to be that patient. But when you find yourself in line at Starbucks, or you find yourself in traffic, or you find yourself waiting on hold for customer service, can you practice in those moments being patient, trusting that other people are doing the best they can, even if they're not doing it exactly the way you want them to or at the pace you want them to? I try to think about this as a father. Our girls, again, are now 18 and 16. And it's a whole different dynamic than when they were, 3 and 1, let's say. But there was a level to which, even in those early days, I would be tired or exhausted, or there were aspects of parenting babies and toddlers that were super challenging and frustrating. But I remember there was just kind of a baked in patience that came with that, because, of course, you're dealing with very, very young children who don't know how to do lots of things. And even though we have to get out the door and we have to go and we're running late for the thing and whatever, but it's like, oh yeah, we're training them to operate in the world, to tie their shoes, to put their clothes on, to whatever the case may be. But can we practice being patient in our busy lives, in the fast paced world that we live in? So that's the second thing that we can do to practice being more kind. A third thing we can focus on is empathizing before we react. Michelle, my wife, read this parenting book years ago, and it would talk about connecting before you correct. So connect before correct. And that was in the parenting context. But I think that's also and often true when we're coaching someone. I talk to managers and leaders about this all the time. Even if you have a good, healthy, strong relationship with someone, like before you dive in to start coaching them, giving them feedback, telling them all the things they can do better, did you take a moment to connect with them, human to human, even if it's on Zoom or maybe email or Slack or text, which isn't ideal, or it's on the phone, or what, it's in person, whatever it is? Can I connect with that other human being on a human level? Do they have a moment? Do I have permission? And can I empathize with them? Whatever they may be dealing with or going through, can I check in with them? And again, we have a lot to do. We have a lot going on. We don't always feel like we have the time to really have a deep, meaningful conversation. And maybe we don't, but can we at least for a moment, for a few seconds, for a minute, just connect with the other human before we react? And again, if you know me well and you're close to me, this is another thing that I do struggle with at times, especially when there's a lot going on, or when the stakes feel high, or the issue is important, or the relationship matters. It's like my brain and nervous system work really quickly. So taking that moment to take a breath, to put my hand on my heart, to try to be patient, to empathize before I react. What might this other person, or what might these other people be going through? What might be happening in their world? If we can put ourselves in the other person's shoes, knowing that, 99 times out of 100, 999 times out of 1,000, it wasn't malicious, whatever they did or said, even if we got really upset or offended. They were just doing what they thought was the best thing to do. So if we can try to remove our self-righteous judgment from things, not have an opinion. We're entitled to our opinions and our responses and all of those things, but there's a difference between reacting, which is just kind of a knee jerk thing often, and responding, which is more thoughtful, more mindful. Okay. Now, again, sometimes things in life really need to be addressed directly, and there's a level of intensity or passion that goes along with the situation that's appropriate. Absolutely. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. Being kind doesn't mean being soft. Being kind doesn't mean, I mean, there's a softness to it, but a real strength in that softness. It's a choosing to be kind, choosing to look for where we can find common ground. How can we empathize with this other person or this situation? So, being compassionate with ourselves, number one, practicing being patient as best as we can, number two, empathizing with the other person or other people as much as we possibly can before we react. Another thing that we can do is to offer help, offer support with or without being asked. One way that our kindness can show up in the world. Now, we got to be careful about this because there's a fine line between being helpful, supportive, generous with another human being and controlling or, you know, overly manipulative. I mean, there's another saying that I don't love, but it's like kill them with kindness. And the idea behind that, right, is that like shower other people with kindness, even and especially when we're frustrated or upset. That one's tricky though, because I don't know that we want to. I don't like the kill part of that statement to begin with, but I don't know that we want to inauthentically be kind, which is really more that sort of fake niceness. But there is a way where we don't have to necessarily get into it with another person and we can sort of take the high road, but do it consciously, authentically. But this idea of offering help or support, whether we're asked or not, showing up to be of service for another human being with our energy, with our mindset, with our questions, with our anything I can do to support you. Just being there. Sometimes if someone's really going through something hard, you want to respect their boundaries, of course, and not just, inappropriately show up at their house. But sometimes if you know someone well enough or you work with someone closely enough, you don't want to overstep, but sometimes you just got to show up and be there, hold their hand, give them a hug while they're crying. Because if you ask, what could I do to support you? If someone's really grieving or someone's really stuck or someone's really in a dark place, they may not even know what it is they need. And look, this can be tricky and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to overstep sometimes and we're going to offend people, not intentionally. But a way of showing up with kindness is just being there and then being able to leave or withdraw or disengage when they either ask us to or it's really clear they don't want our support in the way that we're offering it. Support is about the other person or other people involved. It's not about us. And that can be tricky because there's certain ways that I like to support people better than others. There's certain ways I like to be supported. So I often assume that's how other people want to be supported, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the best way to support someone is to give them space and let them know I'm giving you space because you asked for it and because I'm doing that out of care or concern or love or support or whatever the case may be. So showing up with that service oriented mindset, showing up to offer our help or support, our love, our compassion, whether or not it's specifically asked for. And if we're not sure, we can check in with them. But try not to put the burden on them necessarily. Just do it out of respect. And then the fifth and final thing that I would share that we can do to practice being more kind to others and even to ourselves is to operate with appreciation and gratitude. I mean, I've talked about gratitude and appreciation for the whole 24 years I've been doing this work, right? My first book, Focus on the Good Stuff, came out many years ago. So much of what I talk about in the context of leadership and teamwork and relationships and performance and well being and comes from this foundation of appreciation. And again, appreciating things, being grateful doesn't mean everything's great, doesn't mean we got 100% on everything, doesn't mean we checked all the boxes and we can celebrate a victory. Now, maybe that is the case or that has happened. Awesome. Appreciate means to focus on what we value, to look for and find things to be grateful for and appreciate. Sometimes when things are really challenging, that's the most important time for us to be grateful, for us to really appreciate others and ourselves. What we appreciate appreciates. So what we focus on grows. And showing up for other humans, showing up for ourselves with that sense of appreciation. I see you, I hear you, I value you, I care about you. That's what appreciation really is. And gratitude is about recognizing the value of things and choosing to be grateful. It doesn't mean everything's awesome. So, really practicing that sense of appreciation for other people, for ourselves, for life in general, can bring us to a place of connection, but also kindness. So, those 5 things, it's challenging to be kind for a bunch of reasons in today's world: the pace, the judgment, the negativity, the concern about being a pushover, all the things we talked about, right? But if we can really remember to start with self compassion, being kind to ourselves, practice being patient, even as much of a hurry as we might be in at times, empathize as much as we can before we react, show up with that service mindset to offer help and support, whether or not we're asked, and do it as effectively and appropriately and respectfully as we can. And finally, be appreciative, be grateful. Doing those things can allow us to be more kind. And I mean, we're never going to regret being kind, as the saying goes. And the world could really use as much kindness as possible right now and really all the time. So, whether it's in parenting or relationships or marriage or family life at home, whether it's in leadership or teamwork or professional relationships at work or with our clients or customers or whatever, if we bring a sense of authentic kindness, it's going to benefit us, it's going to benefit others, it's going to benefit the teams and groups and communities that we're a part of. So thanks for listening or watching. Always appreciate when you follow or subscribe or share this video or podcast episode with anyone you think might benefit from it. If you're listening to the podcast on whatever app or platform you listen to, we always appreciate a 5-star rating and a review. And make sure, again, you hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes. There's links in the show notes in the podcast episode, as well as down below on the YouTube video for where you can learn more about me or my work or connect with me on social media. Best place to do that is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. Until next time, keep bringing your whole self to work, to life, and remember, we're all in this thing together.